Today's recipe calls for blueberries. I'm going to show you how to make the best cake ever, also known as lemon blueberry coffee cake. Lemon and blueberry are the best combination out there. So with that said, let's get started.
The first thing we need to do so we can start this little sweet treat is preheat the baking cube. Set the temp to 350 Fahrenheit or 176 degrees Celsius. The next thing we need to do is make the crumb for the top of the cake. Snag a small bowl and a rubber spatula. To that, add in 3 tablespoons of melted unsalted butter. If melting things in a microwave, place a wet paper towel over the top. This will help keep things clean if the butter pops. You want to do this in 10-second intervals. This way it doesn't explode and make a huge mess. Scrape the device clean to get all the fat out. Following the liquid fat, we need to add in the sweet stuff. Dump in a 1/4 cup or 50 grams of granulated sugar. Give that a quick mixer. To counterbalance that, add a tiny pinch of coarse ground kosher salt, roughly 1/8 teaspoons worth. Following those ingredients, we need to drop in the last one, which is a 1/4 cup plus 3 tablespoons or 30 grams plus 3 tablespoons all-purpose flour. I like doing this in 2 sets to ensure the flour is fully mixed into the butter. Add half, then give it a mixer until the flour has become hydrated by the butter. Once that has occurred, repeat the same step with the remaining flour. When all of the flour has been hydrated by the butter, the mixture should resemble a dough-like paste. It'll be somewhat firm but still be a soft consistency. If you can form a small little ball that holds its shape, then you're good to go. If not, add little bits of flour until you reach that point. Once there, set it aside for now so we can move on to making the cake batter. Collect a large holding apparatus and a fine mesh strainer. To that, add 2 cups or 240 grams of all-purpose flour. Following that, add in 3 teaspoons ground ginger, 1 1/2 teaspoons baking powder. Don't forget to add this stuff, it's important. I had to film this video twice because the first time I forgot the baking powder. The cake was still good, just not as tall and fluffy like. Anyways, sift all the goods into one dry, dusty mess. Push through any clumps that were left behind. Before we mix everything together, make it hail 1/2 teaspoon sea salt. Next, add 1/2 teaspoon ground nutmeg. The fresh stuff or pre-ground will work. Give the microplane a tappy tap to knock loose anything that may be stuck to it. Whisk your face off to combine all the ingredients into one. You know you've done it right when you see little speckles of spices throughout the flour. Onto the wet ingredients next. Using the bowl of a stand mixer or any other large type of bowl, add in 1 packed cup or 213 grams dark brown sugar. You can use granulated sugar if you would like. I enjoy brown sugar more, so I opted to use that instead. After it's been added to the bowl, break up any large sugar chunks if any are present. A little fun fact for you, brown sugar has a high moisture content to it, so it's best practice to leave it in its original airtight container. You don't want to pre-measure it and have it set out on your work area for a long period of time. It'll start to form a hard, crusty layer over it, causing the whole thing to turn into a brick. It's not the end of the world, you can still use it, but it'll make it harder to break up and have it properly mix with the other ingredients. Alrighty, enough boring talk. The next item we need to add to the sugar is some lemon zest. We'll be adding the zest from 2 medium-sized lemons. It's best practice to zest the fruit over the bowl because during the zesting process, it'll shoot off some natural sugar crystals, oils, and juices. We want to catch all that flavor. When you're done zesting, run your finger down the backside of the microplane to knock off the zest that is stuck. Also, immediately after that, rinse your tool clean. It'll make it much easier to wash later. Once the lemon skins are in the bowl, using the paddle attachment of the stand mixer or using a hand mixer, mix the sugar and zest together for a few minutes or until the air becomes a lemony, fragrant smell. The coarse sugar grains will beat up the delicate lemon zest, causing it to release the natural flavors it holds, bringing even more flavor to our sweet treat. Give the bowl and the attachment a quick scrape before we add the next item. Toss in 1 stick or 113 grams unsalted butter. Cream the butter and sugar together on medium speed for around 4 to 5 minutes, or until things are fluffy, have doubled in size, and has become pale in color. It's important to do this step. There are many reasons why, but one is because the creaming process aerates the butter, creating air pockets in the batter, so while it bakes, the pockets of air will expand, making the cake rise, giving us a final result that's light and fluffy in texture. Throughout the creaming process, scrape down the bowl, hitting the sides and bottom to help ensure things get mixed well. It's imperative to scrape down the bowl throughout this entire process, especially before you add the next ingredient. Again, to help ensure we end up with a well-mixed batter. Following the creaming process, we need to add 2 large room temperature eggs. It's best practice to crack them in a separate holding device. This way, if we get any shells, we can easily pick them out. Add the first egg into the bowl. Mix it on low speed until incorporated in. Give the bowl a scrapey, then crank the machine back on and add the last egg. Mix until the last one is fully mixed in. After the eggies, pour in 1 tablespoon of vanilla extract. The last wet ingredient we need to add is half a cup or 118 mils of milk of your choosing. Mix all the goods into one sloppy mess. The batter will look like you did something wrong, but don't worry, it'll smooth out. You want things to be fully incorporated together before we add the dry goods in. When things are good to go, it's time to add our flour mixture in. You'll want to do this on a low to medium speed. Again, we'll do this in 2 sets to ensure things are well mixed and to help prevent us from overworking the batter. Add about half of the dry stuff and mix until most of it has been worked into the wet. Give the bowl a scrape and then add the last half of the dry powder. Mix the wet with the dry right up to the point of things being fully incorporated together. Once you can't see any more flour, stop mixing. We do not want to overwork the batter. Doing so will activate the gluten, giving us a dense and tough cake. Scrape the attachment clean. Pro tip, rinse it right away. It'll make it much easier to clean later. If there is any flour dust on the side of the bowl, use a rubber spatula to fold it into the batter. After you've done that, it's time to add the other main component of the recipe, which is 2 cups or 300 grams fresh blueberries. A little trick to make the best cake is to rinse your berries, then drain them really well to get rid of the excess water. You want them to be slightly wet when you add them to a large bowl. Once in the bowl, dump in a few spoonfuls of flour. Shimmy and shake the fruit and flour around. We are trying to coat all the blueberries in the flour. This will help prevent them from sinking to the bottom of the cake. They'll become stuck or suspended in the batter, giving us a better end result. Of course, some will still sink to the bottom because science or gravity or something like that. Anyways, once all the little berries are covered, transfer them to the bowl of batter. Using a rubber spatula, go ahead and fold them in. Give it maybe 6 to 8 folds or until it looks like a majority of them have been mixed in. Because once again, we do not want to overwork the cake batter. You should visibly see, and most of all feel, how light and airy your batter feels when you scoop and fold it. If you notice that, it means you did things properly, meaning you creamed the butter and sugar for the correct amount of time and that you have not overworked the batter. A light batter will result in a cake that will rise when baked, giving us something that is fluffy and pillow-like. A batter that feels thick and heavy means you overworked it, causing the gluten to form, which in turn will give us a dense, dry cake. This little trick takes some practice to learn, but is a good skill to have. Now that the batter is good to go, let's prep our pan. Select a 9-inch springform pan. Give it a spritz of some non-stick spray. If you don't have any, a small bit of oil will also work. Using a paper towel, soak up any excess spray and also spread the oil around to ensure everything has been coated well. Ensure you hit the sides, edges, and any nook and cranny of the pan. Following that, hit the greased pan with a light dusting of flour, again hitting the sides and bottom. Tap the pan to knock loose any excess flour out. Doing all of this may be overkill with a non-stick pan, but it'll ensure nothing gets stuck. Once things have been greased and dusted, transfer the batter from the bowl over to the springform dish. When doing this, be gentle to not deflate the airy cake mix. Ensure you scrape the bowl clean because there's no reason to waste this stuff. It'll also be easier to clean later. Using the rubber spat, smooth the top out into one even layer. Lightly push the batter over to the edge as well. The top doesn't need to be a perfect smooth surface as long as it's even all the way across. This will ensure we achieve the best bake. The next thing we need to do is add our crumble mixture we made from earlier. Cover the top with little pieces of this stuff. You can make them as big or as small as you would like. I went with smaller pieces because I wanted the entire top of the cake to be covered, because this is my favorite part of the entire thing. Once you're happy with how your crumble art turned out, give the pan a once over. Wipe off any batter that's on the edge or the sides with a wet paper towel. If you didn't, it'll burn to the pan, and that sucks to smell and clean. After you've done that, snag the pan of uncooked goods. Gently huck that thing into their preheated oven on the middle rack for the best results. Set a timer to bake this thing for 40 to 45 minutes or until a cake tester comes out mostly clean with just a little bit of crumb on it. Or check it by lightly pushing on the top of the cake. If it springs back immediately, you know it's done. Times may vary depending on how hot your oven runs. When the buzzer rings, pull the sweet treat out of the heat. Test it with one of the options mentioned. If done, place the cake on a wire rack to allow it to cool for 20 to 30 minutes or until you no longer have the patience to wait. In the meantime, we can make our frosting for the top. Snag your Naki lemons from earlier. Roll them out on your work surface to break up the membrane on the inside. This will give us a higher yield of juice. Squeeze the fruit to get as much liquid out of them as possible. Strain and drain the juice to collect any pulp and seeds. In a small bowl, drop in 1 cup or 115 grams powdered sugar. Following the cavity creator, add 1 to 2 tablespoons lemon juice. Whisk your face off to combine these items together. Depending on the flavor and thickness you're shooting for, add more of either ingredient. Thin it out with more juice or thicken it with more powdered sugar. Just keep in mind you do not want to thin it out too much because then it will not stick to the cake. Give it a taste test and adjust the seasoning as needed with coarse ground kosher salt. Once the cake has cooled a bit and our frosting has been made, it's time to get our Bob Ross on. Pop the side of the pan off. You may need to run a knife or tool along the edge of the cake between the cake and the pan to help ensure nothing sticks when you take the edge off. Using a spoon, drizzle the top of the cake with the frosting. You want to make sure the cake has slightly cooled before you do this, because if not, the frosting will just end up being like a soup on top, which I guess isn't really that bad because it's all sweet and tasty. Any Hoosiers, use any decorating pattern of your choice. Also, use as much as your little sweet tooth heart desires. Using a plastic spatula, cut the cake into your desired size. It's best practice to score the top before you cut it, so you can imagine how big of pieces you'll be making. To make the most equal cuts, cut the cake in half from top to bottom, and then in half once again from side to side. Then from there into the sizes you want. I suck at it, so my pieces were not perfect. Also, do your best to wipe your tool clean. This way you can achieve clean cuts. If you didn't wait long enough like I did, the center was still a little warm, so the cake stuck to the tool, which made my cuts / pieces a little rough looking, but oh well, it'll still eat. Eat this cake with some coffee in the morning because it's America. We apparently eat dessert for breakfast, or give this thing as a gift. Whatever you decide to do, just enjoy.
Now that our lemon blueberry coffee cake is done, let's give it the old taste-a-roo. So looking at it, came out looking super, really dang good. There's that deep, rich purple color from our blueberries. Then the outside got a nice golden brown dark crust to it. Then we get a pop of white from our frosting on the top. The cake itself looks very spongy and it looks like it's going to be light and fluffy and just the perfect texture. And if you look really, really hard, you might be able to see some lemon zest. I can't. I'm too old. My eyes are bad. But anyways, let's give it a shot. Oh yeah, and that little crust stuff, the crumb that we built for the top also looks good. You just got to look through the frosting to see it, but it pops in there as well. Anyways, let's try it. This thing came out dang delicious. The first thing that hits your palate is that fresh and fruitiness from our blueberries, and every now and then you might get a tart one, which is a nice change of pace. In the background, you get that faint hint of the vanilla extract, the ground ginger, and the nutmeg, which is a nice base of flavor. You get some richness and fat from the eggs and the butter as well. And of course, that lemon zest also brings some goodness to the table. The icing on top brings a little bit of sweetness, but it brings a ton of the lemon flavor. Then that little crumb that we sprinkled on top brings a good amount of sweetness, which pairs really well with the rest of the cake. It's not overpowering, it's just the right amount. And lemon and blueberry go so well together. That's why we made this cake, obviously. Texture-wise, it's super light, fluffy, pillowy, and just so dang soft. That crumb on the top brings a little bit of crunch factor, which is always nice, and the edge all the way around brings a little bit of texture as well, and it also brings that nice caramelization. Overall, this thing is super good. This cake is fairly simple to make, and you can pretty much make it any which way you want. Maybe add some toasted almonds inside of the cake batter, or get real bougie and ditch the lemon icing and do a lavender one instead to make it extra fancy. So hopefully you enjoyed today's video. Thanks for watching, and go figure out how to make just the crumb part of this cake, because that's the best part, I think. So I'm gonna go do that, and we'll see you on the next one. A little soup. Nice build base. Surprise. And then which builds a good base of flavor. We get a ton of richness and fattiness from our garlic. What the